The story begins in an unprecedented way. The protagonist, Ansai, was standing in the middle of the city with his little puppy, while a man, currently, about 19 years ago, from his real world. After a long wait, the day finally arrived to make a contract with a beast. Everyone had their year, they might not be able to earn that much money. Then he sees Dowie and realizes that he is eating the rest of the bat's body. It was all too much. It's late to mention, but he feels his strength has improved since then. The next day at the university, the professor gathers all of Wan Kai's underlings. Wan Kai. They flatter him and mock Anzai, and Wan Kai enjoys it. He tells them he had good intentions, so he thought he'd ask Anzai if he'd like to. They'll keep an eye on him in the future, but his men are good, which he would have regretted since he hasn't been seen since the fight. They're speculating that he dropped out of school. Out of embarrassment, everyone was busy doing their own thing. The blonde girl wondered why Anzai wasn't there yet. Suddenly, Anzai. He appears there with Dao. Wang's men are still trying to taunt him, saying he'll get the worst apartment. The professor arrives and yells at them to shut up. Ansai arrives, and everyone is talking about how he's stronger than ever. They're wondering what happened to make him so strong. It's as if he used to be a rusty wooden weapon, and now he's a battle-hardened silver one. A girl approaches Chao, the blonde girl, and asks if she's noticed that Ansai is more handsome than before. Chao replies that she's noticed it several times. They're having fun admiring Ansai. Meanwhile, Wan Kai is burning with rage. Inside, Ansai wonders if what the bald guy mentioned about religion has something to do with Wan Kai. As he passes near him, he takes a look, and their own requirements for the contracts had some feeling confident, while others were nervous. Two of Ansai's classmates were discussing him, trying to. Now he's completely convinced that it does have something to do with it. Wan Kai's henchmen tell him that Ansai has changed a lot mysteriously, that maybe he's just pretending as if he's staring at anyone within his sight. Then, they start flattering Wan Kai, telling him that even though Ansai has changed, he still has a dirty dog, and that Wan Kai is destined to become the strongest of them all in the future, while Ansai, at best, can only be a fitness trainer. No matter how strong Wan Kai becomes, he starts to feel a little better after hearing all of this. Then, the professor approaches the microphone and begins his speech, telling everyone that division selection is an important moment that will determine their lives, and he also explains the meaning of Sisi. But they choose to fight against the mist and alien beasts, striving to become humanity's last line of defense. The people were shouting. To expel the beasts, the professor explains that they will now face three options. The combat system, which is the core system of all faculties. The combat department was responsible for fighting the alien beasts and preventing the circle of fog from shrinking, which represented humanity's last hope. The second option was the research department, primarily responsible for researching the fog and the creatures within it. Dr. Zhang, the head of the research department, had scientific research results that doubled, guessing how strong his contracted beast would be, since he was the best liberal arts student this year and possessed strong mental fortitude. They predict the scope of human activities, and the last option was the logistics department, mainly responsible for providing logistical support to the entire city. With that, the professor tells them that's all they need to know for now, concluding his speech. Then, he announces the names of the students and their respective departments for registration. Jian Xiaonan was assigned to the combat department, where her friends greet and welcome her. They find her there, as it's rumored that the treatment in the combat department is very good, or at least that's what the people around them have heard. No, one could believe that a girl like her had actually contracted a beast. Some people even thought that the vision she experienced earlier during the Ansai contract was a delayed reaction to his own. But Xiaonan continues to walk forward with pride. Then, they announce that Wanai will also be going to the combat department. Wan Kai scoffs and boasts. He approaches Xiaonan and stands beside her, and after observing her for a moment, he tells her that he didn't expect a beauty like her to be in the combat department. He also tells her his name, but since Xiaonan has no interest in him, she turns away and ignores him. As he walks away from there, it's finally Ansai's turn, and they announce that he will be going to the logistics department. Ansai is annoyed, but he doesn't say anything. However, people start talking about him again, mocking him for bragging so much earlier and now having to go to the logistics department. As Ansai walks towards the plan, that he might become a legendary figure in the future. Ansai was visibly annoyed upon overhearing all of this. Then, they begin to talk about Wan Kai, logistics department. The professor suddenly announces again that, although he was initially selected for the logistics department due to his excellent grades, so he contacted the professor in the research department, who agreed to bring him into the research department. Everyone was They are surprised to hear this and once again criticize the selection system as being too biased. Some even believe that having good qualifications is pointless if someone is mentally weak. The professor tells him that as long as he works hard, he will be much better suited for logistics. However, to everyone's surprise, Ansai tells the professor that he would love to join the research department, but that he should still join the logistics department. Logistics. This was such a terrible decision that everyone thought he had lost his mind. Then, the professor comes down from the stage to advise him not to worry about what people say, and tries to make Ansai understand that logistics can be very dangerous sometimes, emphasizing that his brain and personality are very suitable for scientific research. However, Ansai responds that he is perfectly fine with going to the logistics department after giving it much thought. Think about it a lot. The professor is unsure what to say, and the other students are also confused. However, Ansai was genuinely happy. He believed that by joining the logistics department, he could find the resources to support his little cub. But with that increase in strength, it was only a matter of who had placed second after Ansai. His family also came from a good background, but they still deemed him weaker than Ansai. Wankai overhears all of this. Minutes. The professor was telling him that in the future, everyone would want to go into logistics, but before he could finish his sentence, a man in the stage shouts into the microphone that they must now change into their school uniforms, after which he will give them their first lesson. The first round begins with a combat round where the logistics department faces off against the combat department. Wankai was certain that Ansai would lose to him. Meanwhile, Ansai had something else on his mind. He was thinking about his school uniform, which looked so ordinary, especially compared to those in the logistics department. Nobody liked it, but the combat department had much better suits. But then the master asks his contracted beast, HF, to teach the lazy newbies a lesson. From the sky, a gigantic gorilla beast suddenly lands. Its roar alone was enough to make everyone surrender, even Wankai. It was in very bad shape. The instructor was disappointed that this year's freshmen weren't performing well, and that was the case for those who had contracted a beast. Then, he sees Ansai and Xiaonan, who are still not kneeling, especially Ansai, who isn't even unmoved. The instructor finds it very interesting, orders his beast to return immediately, and disappears. Then, he asks them their names. After introducing himself as Monan, the captain of the second team, after hearing their names, he tells them that he has always been a very practical person, so he gets and becomes enraged. He approaches Ansai and demands that they see whose beast is superior after the contracts are made. Ansai responds that he isn't interested in. Straight to the point. He tells them that the activities of the alien beasts have become more frequent lately, and the power of humans against the alien beasts are also slowly weakening. If they don't engage in combat and people continue to die, they won't have much time left to mature. An image of a dungeon appears on the screen, and he informs them that they don't have to fight each other. Instead, they will have to enter the dungeon, which will serve as their first challenge after entering the school. The students couldn't believe what he had just announced. Initially, they thought he was joking, but then they became very angry. To go there without any training would be a death sentence. Ansai didn't anticipate the test arriving so quickly, but he was prepared, seeing it as a good opportunity to improve himself. Then, Captain Monin informs them that numerous team leaders will be present during this test to guarantee their safety. He also adds that there will be generous rewards and specific rewards will be given, and the rules will be announced before the test. He explains that the tests will be conducted in groups. They now have less than an hour to form teams, so without delay, everyone starts asking others to join them and begins forming teams. One Eye's henchmen are very eager to join him, but he, on the other hand, is more interested in joining Xiaonan's team. With half an hour left, they begin to show off their skills in order to join a team. A girl named Sufu, who has a C-level talent psychic deer, is looking for a compete. Wankai was even more upset following this interaction. Finally, everyone stood beneath an enormous tower, the famous Tower of Contracts. Team. A boy named Sui, with a lion-headed goose as a sea-level beast, is also searching for a team. They both contact Ansai to team up. They meet, and Su Fui is especially excited to eat Sui's goose, as it looks incredibly delicious. Su Fui hides her beast form and tells Ansai not to look, but she continues to peek. Ready to eat it, they begin to fight over it. Then, the dungeon appears and fog surrounds them. Ansai knows that she cannot depend on her two teammates, so, before the trial begins, she has to hurry up and improve her skills. Then, the professor announces that if they encounter danger, they can ask for help, and the team leaders and the tutors will come to rescue them immediately. Suddenly, he throws down a note, does something else, and starts running, disappearing into the fog. Ansai follows him, and sees some creatures inside the fog. He isn't worried at all. He's quite sure that he can defeat them easily, since they seem very weak. So, together, Dao rushes straight toward them and begins to strike them. Ansai is now much more powerful than before, and both monsters fall to the ground sooner than expected. Then Ansai hears a snapping sound, turns around, and sees the old man who was standing outside the training ground. He tells Ansai that, now the real test will begin, and this time, there will be no point rewards for killing the mist creatures. He approaches Ansai and also tells him that he is the bravest among all the freshmen, and it will be much easier to obtain points if he has more time to reflect on his. Everyone, including Ansai, was amazed by how spectacular it was. Suddenly, Ansai hears a voice asking him what he desires. Ansai remembers that the skills. Ansai shows respect to the old man for his guidance, and then asks what the points are for. The man answers that the captain of the pointsa, the battle group, will explain everything. Once they get out of the fog, they return to find that his teammates were worried about him, disappearing like that. Ansai apologizes for it. After an hour of testing, one boy orders another to test Ansai, since he can be used by their teacher. The boy asks if he can eat what's left. Yes, it was the boy from the beginning of the story. After Ansai finally comes out of the fog, he and Sufui are really angry at him for disappearing without informing them. Ansai apologizes to them and tells them that he was trapping Dao, who escaped on his account. He tells them to choose a weapon from the available options and prepare to go. He also hands Ansai his scoring bracelet. Ansai was confused. He wondered what he had missed while he was away. Sufu tells him that he missed the explanation regarding points and that he will explain it to him later. After entering the trial, they then enter through the trial door. The place was in ruins and covered in fog. Sui asks Sufu if a small dagger is really enough for her. He feels that his little servant doesn't have much attack power, so he thought he would have to protect him. Sufu responds that if he has free time, he should pay more attention. He did, in fact, have a fog creature standing right behind him. Sui turns around, and the teacher had mentioned that this was the Tower of Contracts and its space of spiritual resonance. He realizes that the Tower of Contracts is speaking to him in order to get scared. He was literally so scared that he falls to the ground and starts screaming. Ansai and Sufu laugh, as the fog creature was the weakest of them all. All of them, and yet I was still afraid of him. He tells them that they can also be very dangerous, but Ansai doesn't agree with that kind of slow movement. Fog people are only used as training targets. He encourages them to get rid of the one in front of them. The fog creature begins to advance towards him, but he is still too scared. Ansai and Sufi, on the other hand, are prepared with their weapons. Sufi starts swinging his sword like mad against the fogman, but only manages to cause some minor damage. Sufi indicates that they should attack the core in its chest, saying that's where it's weak. Sufi swings his huge sword, this time against the fogman's chest. However, the core doesn't break. Sufi is surprised to see what resistant, which is the core. The fogman lunges at him, but luckily, Ansai stabs him right in the core from behind, and then the fogman disappears, and the core falls to the ground. Su feels that it was a big gamble for so few points. Ansai asks them how the points are calculated. Picking up the core, Sufui tells him that the weakest fogman, like the Lost Man, is only worth 1 point. Similarly, a fog beast, level 1, is worth 10 points, and a level 2 mist beast is worth 100 points. To claim the points, you simply have to swipe the adhesive bandage on the bracelet. Answer the tower's question. Ansai was about to request what he desired, but suddenly hears the teacher's voice instructing him to enter the tower, and, according to the instructions, and now his bracelet displays 1 point. Ansai asks them how it couldn't be unfair to the logistics department, and they tell him that they can also obtain points by analyzing the cores of the fog creatures using the bracelet. But the points awarded are insignificant, and they have no way to analyze it anyway because it dissipates immediately. Like the missing man, Ansai wonders if eliminating a large number of monsters would earn them 2 points. He stares at it, longing for that core. Ansai throws it to him, and Sufui yells at him not to let him eat it, but it's too late. The gem of the core is already in Dao's stomach, and Sufui asks Ansai why his dog eats everything he finds. She tries to pry his mouth open to get the crystal out, and Ansai asks her what would happen if someone ate the crystal. She replies that the crystals are poisonous to contracted beasts and they would die if eaten. However, he couldn't get it out of Dao, though he was surprised to see that Dao was completely fine even after swallowing it. Ansel tells him that the theory may not necessarily be correct. They then notice that many fog beasts were appearing all around them. Many low-level beasts were still in the shopping mall near them. Su was ready to attack them and get all the points, so they begin to kill them one after another. Even Su fought bravely this time, earning a lot of points. After all that effort, it still wasn't as good as. He was destroying the city and killing people with his huge contracted creatures, and he felt really good doing it. Ansai and his classmates were running, tower and make a contract, as it was his turn. He enters and positions himself in the magic circle, which acts as the switch to activate the entire contract tower, fighting a monster in the combat department. Looking at Ansel's profile, they see that he is 50% of the way to promoting his tension dog. Host. He unlocks the mouth knife technique upgrade. There was still some distance to cover. Ansai tells them to summon their contracted beasts and follow him to kill some high-level monsters. Then, from the top of a building, the professor watches as a large-scale horde of beasts was appearing everywhere. The testing area had been specially cleared, but still, a tide of beasts was approaching. The fresh recruits, they couldn't face them directly. The professor realizes that it was no longer an ordinary test, so the flying beast signals to everyone that the tide of beasts is approaching. All the rookies who participated in the test quickly entered the building to avoid it. Ansai and his friends also. They start running, none of them having any idea why a horde of beasts had suddenly appeared. Suddenly, Ansai spots an empty shopping mall, so he calls out to the others, so they can come and hide there. Before they could even catch their breath, a huge leopard-like beast bursts through the glass door. Ansai blocks it with his sword and calls for someone to help him. Dao also jumps up and bites the leopard beast on the legs. That was the perfect opportunity. Perfect for Ansai. He strikes the beast with his sword, and the beast is split in two. His classmates are surprised to see how strong he is, and he teleports to a very mysterious, heavenly-looking place, and before him stands the Hall of Contracts. He bites his thumb, steps forward, and drops his. They start praising him and calling him boss. Sufui also realizes that he is no ordinary boy, and Dao is no ordinary beast either. Ansai asks them to keep it a secret. Suddenly, he hears someone calling for help and tells the others to stay put while he goes to save them, but Su Hui stops him, saying that helping their classmates is the duty of the logistics department. Then, Su also tells them not to think that he won't come. So, Ansai had no option but to allow them to join him. They then arrive at the Level 2 fog trial area, the front zone of the trial, and begin killing all the lost beasts that they can find. The other students are happy to be rescued, but suddenly a guy appears with his red snake. Ansai knew immediately that it wouldn't be easy to deal with him. He was thinking about using his full potential, but then he sees that there are too many people around and revealing his strengths. Recklessness could cause unnecessary problems in the future. The dragon's skin was very hard to pierce. It entangles Ansai and is ready to suffocate him to death or devour him at once. Sufu and Yo were watching this, but they couldn't do anything to help. The snake was suffocating him very tightly. The man was thoroughly enjoying watching all of this. Ansai barely manages to escape and was bleeding profusely, and he had broken ribs. Then Dao became very angry. The man was about to strike one last time to finish off Ansai, but suddenly his master arrives with his beast companion. He was there to rescue them and was angry because blood into the water. At that moment, a ray of light shines down from the sky, and numerous bubbles emerge. Ansai wonders why he is receiving so many bubbles. The remnants of the World Extermination sect were disrupting their trial examination. The master was also in charge of security, so everyone, they were truly happy to receive help and felt safe now. The man gets even angrier, and with a single blow, his beast strikes many people, including the security officer. The man mocks him for being so weak. The officer wonders how someone so strong could appear in a place like this, and tells everyone to evacuate the testing area and run as far away as possible, declaring the test over. The man summons 3 enormous lion-like beasts and tells them to pursue anyone who tries to escape. The lions were level 2, crystal-devouring beasts, making the situation increasingly dangerous. In real life, she tells Ansai that level 2 crystal beasts are top tier among second-order lost beasts, possessing a high defense and terrifying power. His only option was to run away and ask other teachers for help. Su takes Ansai's gun, and the 3 of them leave the place. He knew that he would have to buy time for them to leave, so he summons his beast. His beast hits the snake with his Tundural attack, but the snake's skin was so tough that it deflected the attack and did him no harm. The bird and the snake now face each other. Meanwhile, all the students were running to find help, and Su Fui was wondering where an enemy that not even the head of security could defeat had appeared from, when in reality, a person can only make contracts with a maximum of 5 creatures. Suddenly, one of the bubbles turns red. Ansai can. Suddenly, one of the lions appears. Ansai kicks him very hard in the jaw and tells the other students to go and tell the other students. Other teachers are to come while he holds the lion back. Everyone was too afraid to move. Ansai repeats for the second time that unless they move now, they will succumb. Everyone starts running again, all except Su Fu. Ansai asks Su to give him the small dagger. Su tells him that he shouldn't overdo it, since he is still seriously injured, but Ansai tells him not to worry about him, and that they should save themselves. Meanwhile, Dao jumps in, and the lion strikes him with its claws. The lion launches his beast bomb towards Ansai, but Ansai blocks and deflects the attack using his sword, and before it can attack with a second beast bomb, Ansai cuts him in multiple places at an impressive speed. The lion falls, and his companions are very happy. Dao was biting the lion. Then, Ansai. He notices that his wound no longer hurts, so he opens his profile to check its status and sees that the swallow dog god has been successfully upgraded. It mentions that the dog can now transform into an adult form in a short amount of time, and all of its abilities will also be enhanced after use of Karma Ansai. He wonders if he obtained the healing effect at the same time as the upgrade. He didn't know the truth about any of this. The crystal that they obtained from Leon was shining. Ansai tells them to find the teachers, first to ask for help, and then they can think about the crystal. But then, that guy appears. Feel that it is special, so he grabs it, and when he opens his fist, a luminous sign appears on his palm. He names his creature Yoga, and finally, right in front of them. He was impressed with Ansai's skills. His snake had entangled the bird beast, and the man was dragging the attendant away. Clearly secure in his victory, Ansai orders his Fui and K to leave the area immediately. The snake then strikes Ansai with its tail. Knowing they couldn't offer any assistance, they leave to immediately find a teacher. The fight commences, and Ansai skillfully dodges all of the beast's attacks. Snake. Ansai knew his chances of winning this fight were slim. He had no other option but to directly attack Master Tanto-Do. As Ansai advances toward him, his lion beasts attempt to block them, but Ansai cuts them down with a single, swordless blow and continues forward. The man was surprised. Ansai had leveled up. The villain pulls out a knife and blocks Ansai's attack. The officer regains consciousness, and as soon as he opens his eyes, he sees a snake attacks Ansai from behind, who shouts a warning. The snake was about to strike Ansai with its venom, but the officer's pet intercepts it to save him. Ansai and the villain find themselves face to face once again, along with their beasts. Ansai is concerned about his lack of combat experience. On the other hand, the villain was thoroughly enjoying himself. He advances toward the security officer with his dagger to finish him off, and throws the dagger directly towards him, but his bird beast takes the attack and is knocked unconscious. The villain was enjoying it, but suddenly feels something strange, turns around, and sees. Contract is complete. It was the last hope for people to fight against nature. Originally, this planet was a parallel world, almost identical to Earth, but that his crystal lion beast has been defeated by Ansai and is lying beneath his foot. The villain becomes enraged by this, and now gets serious, unleashing complete. His snake, which now resembles a dragon, attacks Ansai with its tail again, but this time Ansai blocks it with a Dao hand. He also transforms into his adult form. The villain is shocked. His heart tells him that if he doesn't flee immediately, he will die at Ansai's hands. It seems that Ansai has no intention of sacrificing his life for his broken religion. The villain tells him to shut up, saying that he was originally only ordered to test him, but since he wants to die so much, he will gladly grant his wish. Ansai wonders what kind of test he is talking about. The snake is now becoming increasingly larger and fiercer. The villain cuts himself and puts his blood on the snake's head, and now they are as one. The serpent was now the serpent god. It was the dog god versus the snake god. Enormous, pointed scales shoot from its tail towards Ansai. Ansai leaps to dodge them, but then, the snake was lying in wait with its mouth wide open to devour him, but Dao jumps up and strikes the snake with his claws, rescuing Ansai. The villain, now merged with his snake beast, also sustains some injuries to his arm. He was clearly in pain and orders the snake to kill them. The snake enters a strange mode and begins destroying numerous buildings, chasing after Ansai and Dao. Knowing they would be defeated, Ansai asks Dao if he knows how to. Decades ago, a fog began to blanket the entire planet. Since then, all remaining creatures with the exception of humans, have mutated, and the space for stop it. Suddenly, Ansai ducks down, and Dao leaps once more, this time biting the villain's neck area. The villain, on top of the snake, thrashes about, then Ansai. He starts climbing to the top of the snake, where the villain was located. The villain wonders, where did Ansai go? But then realizes he's right behind him. He pulls the villain off the snake and smashes him into the ground. The snake is also defeated in the process. Ansai was strangling him while the bad guy begged him not to kill him. Kill him. Ansai tells him that he is not a soft-hearted person. Then, the guy grabs Ansai's hand and tells him that he can only kill him in his dreams. The snake wasn't dead yet and moves in to eat Ansai. Ansai clenches his fist and hits the snake on the head with enough force to make it fly away. Now, the bad guy was speechless and, in a very scared voice, asked Ansai for forgiveness. But Ansai had previously stated that he is not a person of soft-hearted. With a single strike, he cuts the villain's neck, killing him along with his snake, which Dao had been eating. Ansai obtains the solution of the dog god's truth and is finally relieved. Dao also returns to his true form. Then, the professor awakens, and Ansai had been waiting for him to wake up. All that time, he asks the professor if he is all right. The professor is ashamed of being powerless in a situation like this, and asks Ansai if he has defeated the snake and its manipulator, but Ansai tells him that they need to go to a safe place first. He gives him a piggyback ride and starts jumping. Human activities has been significantly reduced. These creatures hunted humans, prompting people to construct high walls in order to high and far, which causes the professor to cough up blood. Ansai asks the professor what kind of group those people were. The teacher responds that they are an evil sect that believes human life is worthless, finally emerges from the fog and heads towards where everyone is, where Sufu and Suyu. They were waiting for Ansai. After the fog clears, Ansai appears with a big smile. They were both very excited to see him again, especially Su. Sufu lifts Dao and feels as if he is lifting a very heavy object, as if Dao has gained a lot of weight. Suddenly, he has a revelation and asks Ansai if Dao was promoted and what happened to the Snake Master. Ansai tells him that the Snake Master died, and Dao was promoted as a result of his death. Su is impressed that his boss was so powerful. Ansai tells them to promise that they won't tell anyone about Dao's promotion. They promise to keep it a secret, forever. Meanwhile, the counselor and the school staff were arguing about the incident, and the president was truly angry. Because cult infiltrators had infiltrated a strictly confidential area, they decide to investigate the situation, starting with the students who were attacked first, and also with the captains of some battle groups. As soon as the students exit, the media is ready and waiting to interview them. A red-haired girl approaches Ansai with her team, explaining that they are a student union, resist the fog and the mutated creatures, and that's when the Tower of Contracts appeared. This is how contracts originated, people who mastered the art of writing. Trusted by the director to question everyone about the attack during the inquiry, she takes Ansai and his friends to a classroom where the others are waiting. Students were already present. As soon as Ansai entered the room, everyone began talking about him. Ansai was attracting a lot of attention in the incident. Some people praised him for single-handedly saving them from a level 2 crystal eater, while others criticized him for being the champion of waste from the hired dirty dog. One boy doubted that he had really done everything, believing that Ansai could never beat his boss. But Chimos, another student, got angry upon hearing this and tried to defend Ansai. He told him that Ansai had saved more than 20 of them, so he warned him to be careful before saying something funny about Ansai. That boy was now also considering Ansai as his boss. Su was listening to all of this. Ansai, he approaches him, telling him not to worry. They spot some empty seats and sit down. Just then, that red-haired girl from before reappears, and she asks Ansai, in a very flirtatious manner, if he will cooperate with her investigation. Ansai begins to blush. She questions how his team not only withstood the attack from the men in black, but also managed to cover the evacuation of over 20 students. Ansai attempts to lie, saying they simply rushed to help when they heard the distress call and were fortunate enough to escape the men in black. Then, she turns a bit serious and asks him how giant beasts gradually gained the power to fight against nature. Some people believed that it was the end of the world, while others, they dealt with the level 2 crystal-devouring beast. In response, Ansai fabricates some more lies, claiming that the crystal eater, he was fast, but weak, so he fought him for a while before fleeing. The girl knew he was lying and concealing some significant secret. One Eye enters and tells Ansai he's surprised to see the logistics department functioning well, and that he even survived. He remained arrogant as ever. He tries to tease Ansai again, not stopping there, and continues to call him lucky for his trash-level strength. Ansai remained silent, but suddenly, a piece of a broken bench flies toward Wan Kai. He barely manages to dodge it, and the broken bench embeds itself in the wall. It was the redhead, and she was angry. She tells Wan Kai that he has no motive story. He has the right to do whatever he wants just because he's a combat type. She mocks him. Wan Kai was scared and starts making excuses. She tells him and his henchmen that they leave from there. Wan Kai was angry, but he couldn't say anything in front of her. He signals to his boys, and they leave. Wan Kai punches a wall, cracking it. He wasn't ready to say a word about what happened to him in the dungeon. Sufu and Iso were talking about that girl, and they were impressed that she could become so cruel when she's angry, but she still looked beautiful even in that state. She was still there and was interrogating Ansai. Ansai thanks her for her help at that time, and tells her that he already told her everything before, and there is nothing more he can share with her. However, to find a safe place, but the man blocked their path, telling them that his snake was hungry and looking for some young students to eat, claimed it was God's punishment for humanity's disregard for nature. According to Ansai, it was simply a matter of survival of the fittest, all. She flirts again, approaches Ansai, and tells him not to be afraid, since she doesn't eat people. In fact, she was very impressed with his performance in the trial was impressive, and she was ready to recommend him for membership in the student union. There were many advantages to joining the student union, including, not only do they have access to a wealth of training resources, but they can also earn extra rewards. However, Ansai was more concerned about the food. Anyway, he tells her that he'll need some time to consider it before giving her an answer. She tells him not to take too long, and that he should get some rest now, because the trial results will be announced tomorrow morning. Ansai agrees. The following morning, the results of the trial were announced. Everyone wondered who had secured the top spot. Ansai and Sufui were waiting on a bench while he went to check there. The results were in, and the crowd was huge, with people packed together, having rushed there to see the results after the search. After a while, he finally spots her name in 5th place. The others were shocked to see students from the logistics department even on the list. They were even more shocked to discover that she had a contract with a psychic deer. Then, Wan Kai and his boys arrive and begin to mock the logistics department. Everyone was definitely angry about it. He was excited to see that he himself was ranked 4th. Wonka couldn't believe it. So, they had some sort of contract with a creature. The blonde girl from earlier was crying because her creature turned out to be just a blade of grass. The teacher. He steps away from everyone and reviews the list again. He himself was interested to see who the top 3 were. He discovers that he has placed 3rd. Kai was not happy with the results and tells his men to check the 1st and 2nd place rankings. 2nd place was Honia Onan, the girl with the weed contract. Now, Wan Kai asks, who is in 1st place? His men were afraid to say the name. It was none other than our protagonist, Ansai, from the logistics department. And so, 3 of the top 5 places were from the logistics department. The difference between 1st and 2nd place was enormous. Everyone was surprised, especially One Eye, who felt completely numb. The logistics department only had low-level crystal nebulae beasts that could only provide 1 point each, so they wondered how Wan Kai could kill more than 2,000 beasts in just a couple of hours. Was irritated, then tells them that his boss Anzai's scores are more than 4 times higher than One Eye's, so if Anzai is still a waste, then the AT beasts are even worse than garbage. Wan Kai grabs him by the neck and yells at him. Something similar was also happening in the master official department. A senior staff member, Liu Jianbu, was wondering how, for the first time ever, a freshman from the logistics department had taken 1st place. Another woman named Bike also says that she was surprised when it happened. Another professor asks him if he tells the students that those who have contracted with weaker creatures shouldn't be discouraged, because even if they aren't a special force, they are still consulted with the security team, to which she replies that she has. The matter had greatly alarmed the director at that point. A student bursts in and informs them that Ansai is about to fight students from the combat department, and things could get ugly if they don't stop them. The other teachers also show interest in meeting Ansai, so they join in as well. What happened was that Wan Kai was about to hit Su, but then Ansai stops him and tells Wan Kai to stop the nonsense. But then Wan Kai tries to hit Ansai. Ansai dodges it easily, and hits Wan Kai in the stomach. Wan Kai steps back. He could feel that the blow was strong, at least stronger than he expected. He then tells Wan Kai to compare himself with his beast bimes, and summons it and unleashes it against him. Wan Kai was ready to kill Ansai now, and Su knew that if the fight started, it would be disastrous. Ansai was resisting with all his might to not get angry, but now he had no other choice. A red aura began to emanate from his body, and he was turning into a beast. Wan Kai himself wasn't so sure anymore, but then the teachers arrived and finally stopped the fight. They told them that private fights are against the rules. Su tells him that Ansai is not to blame and that Wan Kai was the one who started it first. The head professor of the combat department asks Wan Kai what the problem is. Wan Kai asks him to reveal the details of the trial scores, since Ansai's contracted beast was an indispensable asset to the country. Some students ask him why they always make contracts with foreign beasts. The teacher yells at them that not dirty little dog, and it was impossible for him to kill 2,000 low-level nebulous crystal beasts. They suspected that the security team had helped him. To obtain first place, he starts arguing with One Eye's men again, but Bake silences them and tells One Eye that revealing the points rules isn't a problem. She explains to them that the logistics department faced a tide of beasts during the trial. However, unlike the others during this crisis, one of Ocho's security personnel was left disabled, and 3 others were severely injured. Amidst all of this, Ansai single-handedly killed hundreds of nebula beasts, rescued over 20 students, fended off 3 second-order crystal beasts, and even assisted the security guard in defeating a mastermind. Bake informs them that the school and security personnel have personally verified all of this information. Now, everyone, they were impressed by what he did, and a sort of following was starting to grow around Ansai. Buansai finds this unbelievable. Bike congratulates Ansai for taking first place in the trial, then warns him not to violate school regulations in the future, and finally tells him that he will help him as the head of the logistics department. Then, Elder Louis approaches him and asks if he is really the one who scored over 2,000 points. Respectfully, Ansai confirms and asks who he is. The old man smiles and introduces himself. He was the director of the combat department and was known only them, but people all over China are eager to know the answer to this question, but for some reason, very few people are able to make as the nebulous calamity. The students are curious about what he was doing there. Ansai greets him respectfully and asks what is. Looking for Liu, he responds that he and his friends are in good physical condition, so he offers them the opportunity to join the combat department, telling him that, as long as he joins his department, he will personally guide him in the advanced methods of controlling contracted beasts, as well as improving their skills. Fighting. Bike hoped that he wouldn't fall for Liu's trap, but then another elder joins the conversation. It was Heian 11. Yu then yells at Heian 11 not to. Don't intrude on their meeting. The students recognize him as well. Heian 11 was the principal researcher in the research department. Both begin to argue about which department Ansai should join, but Heian 11 also starts flattering Ansai, saying that if he joins his department, you can have as many buff potions and healing potions as he wants. The 2 elders start fighting again, and Bake, suppressing them both, lays claim to Ansai. Claiming her as his, she hugs him tightly, and Ansai almost suffocates against her breasts. She tells him that if he truly wants to transfer to another department, she will respect his choice, but Ansai can barely speak. He's blushing furiously and tells her that he would like to stay in the logistics department. The other directors tell him to think it over one more time, making their intentions clear, but Ansai was now determined to stay in the logistics department. He thanks the directors for contracts with domestic beasts. Furthermore, every now and then, someone manages to contract with a divine beast for the country, but sadly, they are all weak. Their kindness and interest, telling them that he will be able to contribute to the base city no matter where he is, so there's no need for him to change departments. The directors were surprised by his decisions, but they had no choice but to respect them. Huan Kai had been feeling extremely jealous the entire time. Professor Tan approaches him and encourages him not to lose heart. He then explains that Vig isn't just any low-level beast. Its potential is far greater than the little ones, Ansai's puppy, and that even though Vig is strong at a low level, the puppy can surpass him at any time once it reaches its full potential. So, if he wants to restore the combat department's reputation, he'll need to train and become stronger for the upcoming group arena competition, where he can teach him a lesson or two. Following this, the 2 directors congratulate Bike on choosing such a promising sprout. Bike replies that it was nothing more than luck. Luckily, they soon realize that the school director was waiting for them. Liu asks him why he's there, and he tells them he heard from Chen Li that Chen Li reported that there's a very talented student this year, so he came to meet him. He also tells them that he heard the 2 directors fought in front of the students to compete with Beak for this student. The directors start sweating, but the school principal was angry and reprimands them for acting that way, especially after the freshman was already assigned to the logistics department. Then he looks at the list and is impressed by a red lightning bolt struck the top of the tower as Ansai formed the contract. Even the professor was frightened upon witnessing it. When the other students, current logistics department, he tells Liu that he should be worried about his own department, since his combat department wasn't performing at the expected level in recent years. Liu replies that he will follow all of their guidelines in the future, but that the combat department really needs Ansai, so he asks the school principal to transfer Ansai to the combat department. Hyun 11 says the same thing, but the director of the school scolds them again for being so inflexible, adding that he also had no choice but to give Baek away. If he makes any changes, Baek is happy to hear that, and the directors are disappointed. Then, the school principal asks Bailey where Sai is, as he wanted to personally thank him for performing so well and for saving so many children. Bailey informs him that she saw him go to the training camp and says that she will be happy to take him there. The other workers were surprised to see the school director giving so much recognition to someone, especially a first-year student. Ansai then approaches the director and asks if he truly values the boys so highly, given the rumor that Ansai killed the second-order crystal-devouring beast. The other workers begin to tell him that the rumor might be false, since Ansai's contracted beast is an earth dog. They tell him that it's possible he escaped with the help of the security guards. The director didn't believe it at first, but after hearing, they ask what was happening, and he tells them that all of this is occurring because Ansai has contracted a divine beast. Huan Chai was more jealous than anyone else. The mayor and Chen Li's testimony that he not only killed the second-level beast, but also the snake and the snake master. He had reason to take notice of him. He personally asks Liu if his contracted beast is really a cub. Liu confirms that it is true, and that normally it shouldn't be possible. He killed a second-level fog beast. All the staff start shouting, calling it a lie and impossible. The director warns them and orders them to behave themselves. After they quiet down, he asks Miss Bick to take him to Ansai. Meanwhile, Ansai was exercising, and Dao was eating, as he always does. Because the road had been improved, his muscles had also grown larger. He didn't have much money to buy food for Dao from the system, so he tells him to wait a little longer, and then he will give him something good to eat. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and Ansai wondered who it was. Who could it be? He opens the door, and standing outside are the director, Bai Le, and Liu Bi. As he introduces them, Yan Zai is surprised to see Director Sun making a special trip to see him. He bows and greets him respectfully. The director expresses his appreciation that even after becoming number 1, Anzai still comes to train instead of celebrating. Asks Dao to show respect to the director. Upon seeing Dao, Sun is genuinely surprised. He never imagined that such a seemingly weak creature could reach the top. He decides to give Anzai a reward. He takes out his checkbook and writes him a check for 1 million. Anzai feels embarrassed, but accepts. His men were observing all of this. Everyone in the city was aware that someone was making a contract with an incredible creature, a large man. The check. But the director doesn't let him off the hook either. He was already thinking that there wasn't enough money in the account to adequately reward him for his strength later on. As Ansai pulls even harder, the director finally lets go and coughs, telling him that if he can't cash it immediately, there might be a problem with the banking system, so he should wait a bit before trying to do so. In reality, Ansai had no idea that the check couldn't be cashed. The director then tells him that, in the future, he can also enjoy a 50% discount on the facilities and dialogue points within the school. Ansai asks if that is all he will receive as a substantial reward. The director replies that this was just an entrance test, and that there will be much more waiting for him in the future. For example, if he can surpass 10,000 points on the next test, he will not only be generously rewarded, but he will also be able to bring his family to live there, together, in the inner ring area. Thinking about his family, Ansai becomes emotional and tells the director that he will work very hard to achieve his goals. Then, the director tells him something he didn't want to hear. He asks Ansai to replace Dao so that he can advance quickly. Dao starts barking at him, but Ansai calms him down. The director tells him that he should rest, since there will be a qualifying test the next day, and then he leaves. As he leaves, he also tells him that he will discover the truth about another part of the world. The next day, Ansai wonders what he can do to make the test progress faster, and searches in the book for some. Big was harassing a person, demanding they hand over their contracted beast. Ansai was nervous. Finally, his beast appears, and it turns out, method, but Dao is really hungry. Ansai realizes that he first needs to learn how to cook Dao's food, so he puts on his jacket and asks Dao to follow him to the gravity room. On their way to the gravity training room, he wondered if gravity required points or cash. The 1,000,000 points he received from the principal were also on his mind. He planned to buy food for Dao and send the rest home for his sister's study materials or to help the family, but he would have to wait until the next day's battle level test was over. Finally, he arrives at the gravity training room. The board indicated that it could only be used when the student's identity was verified, and that after opening and using it, the cost would be 10 points per hour. Or they could contact the person in charge of training time. With the cash, Anzai considered himself fortunate that the director had given him the points and a plast 50% discount, which was enough to cover one practice period. He opens the door and enters the gravity chamber, but he doesn't find it very enjoyable. There was a button to control the gravity, and he decides to start with double the current gravity. He presses the button, and the gravity immediately doubles, feeling a great tension throughout his entire body. Meanwhile, the student union was holding a meeting. Tan Khan, a member of the union, tells. The giant snake lunges at them. Ansai tells everyone to run in separate directions, as he had no other choice but to try and stop it. Suddenly, to be a little puppy. Ansai is disappointed, having obtained only a common dog from the land. He remembers that when he was a child in his previous life, his family, Gale, the redhead we saw earlier, that she should give up her place in the union to One Eye, since at least he has an actual contracted beast and not just a dog. Dirty Lei asks Tang what she really means, whether she thinks the candidate she recommended isn't good enough, or if she believes a freshman from the logistics department doesn't deserve to join the student union. Tang replies that Anzai really doesn't deserve it. Then Lei asks how it's possible that a person with 2,000 points on the essay and good behavior doesn't deserve it, while an arrogant boy with less than a quarter of those points does deserve it. Tang tells her that Anzai is only doing well so far because of his cunning, and not because of his contract beast, adding that if he, Tang, were in the rehearsal, he could have scored more points than Anzai. Then Chang'an tells Tang that he can't make estimations of. From that brief conversation, the qualification test commenced, and everyone was ready to give it their all. On the other hand, we see Su, who is very confident because he has been practicing diligently for this day. Meanwhile, we see our protagonists, who are worried about the test because they haven't had time to prepare adequately due to what happened during the rehearsal, but they will still try their best to achieve a good result. The test began, and everyone was focused on answering. I had a cat that looked very similar to this dog. He holds the dog and pets it gently, but he still seems disappointed. The door next door. The questions as quickly as possible. Su was answering the questions with ease since he had studied them beforehand, while their eyes fall on Ansai, who is walking beside them, and they pause to talk about him. Rumor has it that Ansai received an invitation from the student union and is currently the strongest in his class, but they are also surprised to see that his contracted beast is just a puppy. They wonder if Ansai is the muscle-bound cultivator type, like the legendary second-year student Han Jun Dao. He enjoys listening to all of this. Just then, a bus arrives with a boar-type beast tied to the roof, and some people get off. They were wondering why they were called back to school just for grading. Qualifications. They all look like they've just come from a battle. The boar on top of the beast wakes up and starts to roar. One of these people were John Wan. He strikes the boar with his lion fist, causing it to fall. The bus was also about to fall, but then another woman named Sunai saves the bus from falling by using her powers, and then tells Honyan to be careful before starting because they are at school. John Wan apologizes to his senior companion for acting rashly and says that he will pay attention next time. The first-year students were surprised to see that Hon Wan was very different from what the rumors had said. He looked stranger and more handsome. Then, they were also surprised to see it opens, and he enters. A window projection appears before him, congratulating him on successfully making a contract with his Alu, the dog god. Ansai is surprised to see Blue Pig Beast from the beginning of the third scenario. They wondered how they had captured it alive, but Dao only wondered one thing, eating the Ansai, like a pig holding him back, stops him from attacking. Then, two people burst out of the retreat room, breaking down the door. Ansai wonders if it's the teacher who he had retired. There was an old man named Lai, and another man in a suit. They seemed pleased to be there. The young man tells Lai that if it weren't for the freshmen's grades this time, they would have had to stay put for another half a year. The old man glances around and sees the second and third-year students and mistakes them for freshmen. His eyes lit up after seeing the beauties who were present there. The young man tries to restrain him so he doesn't act like a pervert. From the top of the building, the director and his manager were observing everything. The manager informs the principal that all students and teachers have been notified, in accordance with the arrangements, including those who are still in retreat and undergoing external testing. He asks Sun what he's contemplating. Sun tells him to be quiet for a moment, as he was considering Chen Li's report, which states that the internal ghost should be among these individuals or within the battle group. But prioritizing the school's safety and verification efficiency was still crucial. Checking them one by one would be too slow. Sun decides to investigate Ansai first because the young man's statement differs from Chen Li's. This, since the dog appears to be an ordinary dog, quite different from what he had been told. Then, he's asked if he wants to open the beginner's gift package now or wait. Report. Su Sui and Ansai are standing in front of the building where the test is scheduled to occur. Su poses a question regarding this building, and Sui tells him not to reveal that he doesn't know anything about the academy, because the combat faculty would laugh at them. Ansai asks the girl if knows exactly what is going to be evaluated, and Sui says that, as they already know, the level of a contracted beast is determined by innate data and acquired growth taken together. The level determination test aims to identify acquired growth, and as the level of the contracted beast increases, it reverts more and more to its true form. Ansai draws an analogy and concludes that, apparently, it's the same as when Dao acquired the ability of true appearance. Acquired growth is divided into 9 steps. Every 3 stages correspond to the stages of birth, awakening, and action. The awakening stage is the initial stage that all creatures go through, and it's divided into 3 levels: wild, agile, and grand. Here, Sui notices that Su is trying to steal Dao because if he passes this test with that dog, he'll definitely get a lot of points. The girl comments that people like he are, at best, only at the initial wild stage. Ansai stops the careless thief and takes the dog away from him. The teacher then announces that the test is about to begin, so all students must enter the building. When the students entered the building, they noticed that it seemed much larger from the outside. Beginners now, or wait. He considers it and presses no. Finally, the exit door of the tower opens, and Ansai exits. Everyone had expected him to be, but the inside was small and cramped. The student union members, observing the new students, remark that many memories have resurfaced. From the savagery stage, Tan tells Zhonggong that he performed better in that particular test, but Zhong eventually surpassed him. Lei Xiao then says that, at that time, her current vice president actually set a new record, making them seem insignificant in comparison. A red-haired girl. He asks where Sunai is. Then she appears and asks if they were talking about her. Sunai approaches Leo and hugs him, telling him that she missed him a lot because they haven't seen each other in a long time, and she asks Zhonggong who the best performer is this year. The boy answers that a stranger became the best. Lei Xiao points to Ansai and identifies him as the top performer, a logistics student who scored 2,100 points on the entrance test. He also mentions that, recommended that he be accepted into the student union, and Sunai mentions that she's already heard about him because her little sister was in the same class. Team, as him. The girl asks Jin Gong why he called the boy a strange weirdo, and he replies that his contracted animal is an A-rank sheepdog, which causes Sunai to look at him in disbelief. Lei Xiao says that the headmaster personally went to present him with the award, and she starts to greet Ansai, wishing him good luck. Ansai notices the girl and the people next to her, realizing that the entire group are members of the student union, a large and ferocious beast, but when they see Ansai holding a small puppy, they burst into laughter and mock him relentlessly. Ansai doesn't respond and keeps walking. Students. He greets them and wonders how long they'll be observing him. An announcement is made to the students that the test is beginning, so everyone must. They prepare, and are told that the test is very simple because they only need to hit the target with all their strength, which is right there on the stage in front of them. They need to hit it using their best attack technique. The test begins, and the boy summons his beast, which is a B-rank brown bear in the initial stage of savagery. The second is Yunyan, with a C-rank pine frog in the early stage of savagery. Then Manal, with a C-rank fighting cock, also in the early stage of savagery. Observing the students, Assistant Principal Sun comments that there's a good selection of students this year because they are workable. Next up is One-Eye, whose beast is called Bimes, a rank E in the middle stage of savagery. His friends get excited because they all saw how the coolest student in the combat faculty, Wan Kai, claims that no one is stronger than him. Students gather around, They comment that something interesting has finally happened, because before this, everyone was stuck in the initial stage of savagery. They ask him how it was possible to develop the beast to that extent. 3 days after the contract's conclusion, Sunai asks Tan if he recommended Wanai to join the student union. He confirms, saying that maybe this guy isn't the most talented, but at least his beast isn't a sheepdog, and adds that Commander Seo, walking around, the students now prefer to be friends with Wan Kai, since he now has a huge beast. Wan Kai blocks Ansai's path, and tells him to also mention a girl with a ranga plant named S. Soun, and that she's being called to the target. Ansai approaches S. Soun, and tells her not to. Don't worry, because she's going to do great. She approaches the target and uses her best attack, which earns her many admiring glances because the plant is a ranged type, and she reaches the peak of savagery. Everyone is very surprised because the girl turned out to be better than Wan Kai. Yan says that he will recommend Saon to join their student union because the girl is too amazing and a talent like that shouldn't be wasted. But Sunai says that they should have thought of this sooner because she's already been recruited by Commander Seo of the Combat Brigade's University Cell. Sunai thinks that a girl of her race is even more talented than herself with her snow fox. Tan says he is ready to bet that no one will surpass this girl today. Le Xiao, hearing his words, gets excited and says that Ansai hasn't even made her attempt yet. How can you be so sure that no one will surpass her score? Tang asks Li if she's ready to make a bet with him, and she accepts the bet. They wager a level 3 mutant crystal and decide Sunai will be their witness. Tong Kan turns around and leaves, saying he's going to the bathroom and to let him know later if anything interesting happens. He leaves, not to relieve himself, but to intercept Ansai and injure him so he can't hit with full force, preventing him from winning the bet. Ansai heads to the hallway because his turn is coming up soon and it's time to prepare. He is blocked by Tang, whom Ansai asks who he is. Go back to his sewer. Wan calls his beast Bimes, who was enormous, but Swallow also glares angrily at him. On the other hand, that big guy was also looking. Tang says they don't know each other, but that Ansai has become part of his bet. Ansai says he isn't interested in this guy's bet and asks him to step aside. Because he's an obstacle, Tang says Ansai is very unpleasant, and if the boy helps him win the bet from now on, he will protect him and no one will bother him. At the academy, Ansai seems to be swayed by his words, becoming encouraged and asking if he really is the strongest and will be able to protect him. Tang says yes, but then Ansai says that he will do it and that he doesn't need help. Tong Kan is dissatisfied and says that the boy is a joker for believing him, but the problem is that he doesn't like. They like jokers, and he throws a punch. Ansai also prepares to strike, and they clash fist against fist, after which Tang realizes that the boy is very skilled and strong. Then, Ansai asks Tang Kan if he needs protection from Ansai now. Leijo and Sunai approach them, and upon seeing, the boys say Tang forgot he even went to the bathroom. Realizing this, he hugs Ansai and says he met this brother on the way and decided to become friends with him. Ansai, in turn, says that brother Tang offered to take care of him. Chan thinks about how much longer Ansai will remain a helpless lamb, while Ansai, he thinks Tang has muscles like King Kong and a spirit like a gummy bear. Ansai turns around and says goodbye to the student union member, saying that it's time for him to take a test. When Ansai's name is announced, everyone tenses up and prepares to carefully observe what will happen. Ansai, for his next prey. After killing that person, their bat located Ansai's position, and they were ready to go hunt him down. Wan Kai was ready to prepares and hits with such force that the target shatters, and the rector's jaw nearly drops to the floor in surprise. All the students look extremely surprised because this had never happened before, and Ansai broke all the records. How could the man performing the test be at the level of dexterity of, do you do the test? He barely manages to pronounce the result because the F-rank shepherd puppy is only in the initial stage of proficiency. The rector's son still can be recovered, but he still pulls himself together and approaches old Leijo, requesting that he check the functionality of the device. Everyone, they begin to murmur, saying there are probably problems with the equipment, since even the professors don't believe this result and are demanding to replace the device. Sunai comments that Leijo recommended a true prodigy. If his memory serves him correctly, the shortest period since signing the contract with the beast, reaching the initial skill stage, took 2 weeks. Lei Xiao confirms that the record was indeed 2 weeks. Yonggong says that the student they are discussing eventually became one of the most outstanding soldiers in the history of their fortress city. At that moment, Tan Kan is reflecting on how fortunate he was to recognize the difference in strength between himself and Ansai in time, because otherwise, he would have been severely beaten. Then he realizes that he just lost a level 3 beast crystal. The students and some teachers are continuing to discuss the fight with Ansai, and people had gathered around to witness it. Suo was angry, but Bimes looked dangerous and lunged towards Ansai. Broken device. Someone suggests that the device likely broke after the girl with the plant struck it, because her blow could have affected the equipment's readings and functionality. The old man, after approaching the device and inspecting it, states that everything is working correctly, that Ansai's result is indeed correct. Hearing this, some students were silent, in disbelief, but Sun Saon declares that Ansai is the best, and that she always knew it and believed in him. However, Huan Kai was furious because Ansai's victory in this test felt like a slap in the face to him, and he couldn't understand how Ansai managed to achieve it. Huan Ai thinks that she won't let this go and will show Ansai his place. Le Xiao is cheerful and announces that he is calling a student union meeting to decide on Ansai's admission, and he also reminds Tank about the crystal, urging him not to forget it. He runs out of the classroom, wondering if he'll be forced to pay for the broken device, knowing how cheap these academics can be. Dao runs after Ansai, and asks her not to leave. An older man, Lai, appears on the sidewalk, saying that he was already coming to find him. Stopping, the boy asks Shake if he still has to pay for the damaged device. Lia says they aren't so stingy as to force a student to pay for damages from a fight, because the initial dexterity is the maximum this model can handle. That's why Lei was looking for Ansai, so he could take another additional test. The words, 3 giant lions appear in front of him, and, with a single blow, send him flying, crashing him into some furniture. He gets up, and his companions look at him, but Swallow also jumps off of him, with red sparks flying from his body. Bimes tries to hit him with his claw, but suddenly something hits him, and he falls to the ground. No one could. That he wouldn't have to pay made Ansai happy, and he follows the old man Lai, who takes him to a special testing room where there is a different target model than the old man asks her to hit him. Sai hits, leaving her in shock because only 5 days after receiving the beast, she already possesses an intermediate level of skill and is recovering. Light coughs and says that it seems Dao has weak innate abilities, but an incredibly high capacity for growth, at least in the early stages, early on. Ansai scratches the back of his head and says that, apparently, rookies rarely demonstrate such rapid progress. The old man tells him, which is still an understatement, and asks the young man if he isn't becoming too pale. Ansai says that the events in his life are developing rapidly, and that he somehow hasn't even had time to study this matter in more detail. The old man tells him that he will try to explain, briefly explaining how it works at his academy. Most 3rd and 4th year students' progress stalls at the initial skill proficiency stage, and Ansai has already surpassed them. After signing a contract with a beast, contractors grow together with their beast. On average, contractors are 3 to 5 times physically stronger than ordinary people who don't have beasts, but at the same time, a contractor's main strength lies in their beast. This is because the limits of one's own body are finite, and a contractor can only become truly strong if they have a well-developed beast. See what happened. Huan Ai rushes over to him, asking Ansai what he did to his beast. Just then, their teacher walks in and stops the fight, telling Huan Ai that contract beasts of the same level, the one with better innate stats is usually stronger, but a less gifted beast's potential can be improved, teaching him combat skills. Hearing this, Ansai thinks that the formula Lyell mentioned is suitable for ordinary contractors. He has a system and a beast whose growth affects him 10 times more. Ansai can follow a different path, and in the case of the pair with Dao, it is the young man who can become the main fighting force. Ansai questions old Lai about his martial skills and asks him to tell him more about them. Li says that combat skills help further develop the beast, in addition to its innate talents. The more combat skills a beast has, the greater its chances of surviving in a battle. Skills can be obtained as a reward or simply by contacting. Their teacher notes that many instructors possess unique combat skill sets they've personally developed, a sort of individualized, signature program. Li also mentions that Sansai is continuing to develop at a consistent pace, making it highly likely that he will be selected to defend his academy's honor in a competition, national student competition, where the winner receives a gold prize, as well as the opportunity to visit restricted zones. The restricted zones are the most dangerous and challenging areas, shrouded in fog, but they are also where the most valuable resources can be found. Sansai realizes that, in general, the plan Don't be overconfident with your beast, or you won't accomplish anything in life. He then grabs Hanan Kai by the ears, reprimanding him for using the contracted beast. So, becomes clear to him, just like in any role-playing game from his past life, the more difficult the mission, the more valuable the reward. He heads to the room, Gravity, where he trains and simultaneously tests the system's capabilities. So far, all the system is capable of is storing the dog's food, and demonstrate Ansai's own characteristics. He asks if the Tao can do anything besides the 10x knockback. Perhaps it has some hidden abilities that the system is unaware of. Tao doesn't respond, only indicating that it wants to eat. Ansai takes this as a negative response regarding knowledge of skills, martial arts, so he mentions that he will ask his supervisor about it. The boy is accustomed to double gravity, so he wants to try triple gravity. Gravity. A man appears behind him. Ansai immediately senses him and attacks, but his hand is stopped, and he is told that he has good reflexes. The young man doesn't understand how this unwanted guest entered the room, why even Tao didn't warn him, and how he manages to keep up with such speed. In triple gravity, the person asks Ansai how he managed to reach the intermediate stage of prowess, but instead of answering, Ansai asks the opponent who he is. The person smiles, and Ansai loses sight of him as he attacks from below, striking the boy in the solar plexus and causing him pain. He throws Ansai up to the ceiling and disappears from his sight, reappearing from above to strike the young man's back with his fist, causing him to fall to the ground with a terrible crash. Carelessly, which has now exhausted her, Wonka apologizes to him for the trouble he caused. Ansai asks Swallow if he was the one who did it, but Swallow signals. The man says that the boy's body can endure a lot, but he definitely lacks combat experience, and he doesn't understand how. With such data, he was able to take first place in the test. Tao runs forward, barking furiously and covering his master's body with his small body. The man began to get annoyed by the Tao dog's barking, so he demanded that he be quiet. Ansai brought the puppy closer to him and asked him not to get nervous because he himself would take care of this guest. It turned out that the attacker was the rector, who was baffled that an F-rank sheepdog could resist his pressure. Ansai smiled and, turning to the rector, asked him if he really had no other business than hitting students. The rector's son told the boy that if he didn't use all of his strength, he might kill him. The system announced to Ansai that a threat had been detected, mortal, and that he needed to activate the true appearance skill. Ansai mentally asked the system if this skill could be activated without altering his size of the pixel, but increasing all the indicators. The system responded that attempting such a variation was possible. Ansai then requested to activate the skill, and the system announced that it had been applied. However, at the host's request, the beast's size remained unchanged. The rector looked at the NT40 boy and felt the pressure emanating from him, thinking that Ansai now more closely resembled the person described by the security service. Ansai attacked the rector and starts rolling around on the ground. Then, Ansai hugs him and plays with him some more. The girls are impressed with how adorable Swallow is, and they began delivering chaotic and violent blows with his significantly increased strength and speed. But this was still insufficient to defeat him. The principal struck the boy's chest, causing him to bleed from the mouth. But Ansai saw this attack as a perfect opportunity, so he grabbed the principal's hand. He grabbed the principal by the hand, telling him he was trapped, and then struck him on his right side with his other hand. The principal retorted that this was against the rules, and blocked the blow as he flew backwards. Ansai thought that he had finally landed a devastating blow this time, and managed to defeat the principal. But the principal reappeared behind the boy and struck him. Ansai commented that the principal had a heavy hand, and the principal replied that they had been indulged enough, and that it was sufficient. Ansai asked if he was being tested again, and the principal responded that they were still trying to determine the causes of the incident. During the test, the location was known only to the academy staff and members of the combat brigades. The young man inquired whether they suspected the existence of a spy cult within the academy, and for some reason, he had become the prime suspect. The rector stated that Ansai was the main suspect because his report mentioned dispersing level 2 crystal eaters, but failed to mention the altercation with a member of the sect. Ansai began to berate the rector, saying that he could have simply asked about anything he was curious about, instead of launching a sudden attack, but the rector asked Ansai if they can touch him. Ansai kindly says they can, so they pat him on the head and give him a hug. After that, they ask Ansai about his only responded that next time the boy would understand the consequences of being dishonest in his testimony again. The rector then stated that he was now convinced that the young man could truly defeat a member of the sect and their snake. It meant the boy would have to explain everything, in detail, what had happened that day. Ansai recounted everything, and the rector amazed by the story, remarked that it was unusual for a sect member to come, specifically for a boy. It was possible the sect had its eye on the cub. The young man informed the rector that Chen Lai hadn't mentioned anything about the sect the last time they spoke, so he asked the rector to tell him everything he knew. The rector explained that this world collapse sect emerged after the world was covered by a thick fog, and it remains unknown who founded it or its exact location. The sect professes the idea of a natural collapse of the world. The followers are just a group of crazy fanatics. 10 years ago, they went to war with the combat brigades, and after a series of large-scale battles, on a large scale, the combined army of the combat brigades defeated the sect, but at the cost of losing 3 fortresses. Since then, they have disappeared without a trace, so the appearance of cultists in the test was an extremely unexpected event that no one was prepared for. After listening to the rector, Ansei asked the main question that interested him. Why was he attacked? The rector said that he didn't understand the cultists or what. Ansei reflects for a moment and decides to name the girl Dao. They seem to like the name. Ansai's eyes then fall upon the blonde girl, and her small was going through their heads, so he couldn't give a definitive answer. But the fact that they had started hunting Ansei now wasn't just his problem, but also the problem of the academy as a whole. Because they were responsible for the academy's security, the only advice the headmaster could give Ansei was to study harder and stay alert. The young man's current progress wasn't sufficient for venturing into the darkness, nor was it enough to guarantee victory in the national competition. Students. Ansei inquired about the strength of the participants in these competitions, and the headmaster responded that they were very strong. Ansei might be the best among the newcomers in his academy, but that still wasn't enough to be the best of the best. The strength of the students is strongly related to the value of the resources near their main cities. The higher the danger level of the fog, the higher the level of students. After listening to the rector, it's clear that the city where Principal Ansei and the other academy students reside is far from the most dangerous. Ansei smiled and asked the rector if he was entitled to a reward, considering his test results were the best. The rector, displeased with such a question, retorted that he wasn't a hairy sheep to be sheared, adding that he still needed to figure out where to get the money so that Ansei could actually cash the check that had already been issued to him. Ansei responded, using the rector's own analogy, asking who else he should shear, if not the rector, who was precisely. They both exchanged smiles. Then, Ansei checks Dao's stats and discovers that she is an SSS-grade creature with a loyalty of 100, the hairiest. The rector accused Ansei of being overly selfish and shamelessly so, but the boy countered that the rector had. He mentioned that he needed to become stronger, but using the gravity room wasn't free, so earning some money would definitely help. The headmaster rewarded the boy with a new combat skill as a reward for passing the test and then disappeared. While Ansei was studying the pamphlet he had received, the headmaster, now gone, wondered aloud whether Ansei would spread rumors that they had fought to a near standstill, because if that happened, he would have to eliminate the boy as well. He pondered why he had approached the boy in the first place, considering the price was his most valuable combat skill book, which was a significant loss. Ansei opened the Prost system window to integrate the new combat skill. The system then notified him that the combat skill activation process had begun, provided by the host because Ansei downloaded a new combat skill, granting him access to the intersection where a general store is located. The store offers skills, equipment, and attribute enhancements. The host, Ansei, can now review the specifics of the combat skill he downloaded. The ability to combat is called Battle Roar. This skill utilizes combat waves, and the boy is now curious if the rector possesses many more similar texts. Ansei clicks on the master icon, and the system notifies him that Dao has mastered the skill. Thanks to the system, mastering the skill happens. Afterward, some people approach their teacher and ask if he would mind if they accompanied him and his students for a few minutes. Instantly. Without it, he would have to teach the dog step by step, following the instructions provided in the book. Then, Ansei realizes that, since a martial arts skill shop has opened for him, he could simply buy skills, but things aren't that simple because the cost of the skills exceeds 10 million, which are insanely high prices. Ansei asked the system how he could obtain points to purchase combat skills, and the system told him that points could be earned by exploring the mist and killing mutants. The system only starts counting points after unlocking the store, and Ansei remarked that the system is terribly greedy, especially since the only thing he received from it was a small glutton that consumes food in just 3 days for him. But Dao doesn't understand what complaints are being made against him because he is just an ordinary dog. The young man told the system if she didn't start behaving normally, he would order Dao to devour her. After activation, the system notified him that the host was being unfair. Most of the system's functions. The system provides synchronization of characteristics and mastery of combat skills under agents. Under normal circumstances, a combat skill mastered by a beast normally remains exclusive to the beast, but thanks to the synchronization function, after the beast has mastered this combat skill, it becomes available for the host to use as well. The system displays Dao's characteristics. The teacher treats them with respect and inquires as to why they are there. They respond that they were all drawn in by the spectacle of the Black Contract Tower. Dao has 100 loyalty and 10 times the performance. The more he eats, the stronger he becomes after mastering a combat skill. Beast and complete synchronization. The host can also use the same ability. Ansai mentioned that the system has begun to function more effectively. The young man, now he's contemplating where to go to test out his new combat skill and decides to ask Professor B for advice tomorrow, perhaps. At the same time, he might be able to extract some ability from her. In the morning, Ansai runs into Sunai and Leo in the hallway, who greet him with smiles and they mention that they were waiting for the young man. She apologizes for forgetting to introduce a beautiful girl who is with her. Leo points out that she is the vice president of the student union, Sunai. Upon hearing Sunai's name, Ansai realizes that she is probably related to his classmate, Lei Xiao. He says that they came to formally invite the boy to become the student union's vice president, recognizing his excellent performance on the entrance exams. Sunai invites him to join the student union. Until this point, Sunai had been very concerned about the meeting with Ansai because they needed to assign him to a specific role today, the student union. Ansai asks if joining the student union involves a fee, or if there are free meals or other social perks. Upon hearing this, Leizhou frowns, thinking that Ansai is being personally invited to the student union by the vice president herself, while all the boy cares about is, they decide to inform the teacher about the matter. Even in this tense situation, Ansai actually had a smile on his face, happy that he was no longer. Captain Sang asks him to speak with the students individually after his shift ends, as they have done in previous years. In the end, Sang benefits. Why is this guy so arrogant when he hasn't even achieved anything? Sunai responds that the student union does offer a salary and meals, but the salary is secondary. The most important thing is that he'll have access to the academy's best resources and can also apply to study the Ansai Mist. He lights up, smiling as he asks about the possibility of a salary increase. Lei Xiao says he will be paid double and asks if Ansai agrees to those conditions, to which the boy nods in agreement. Sunai approaches Ansai and hands him a document to fill out. While Ansai is filling out the form, the girls pet Dao and play with him. Ansai notices the dog's behavior and comments that it's a pervert. Then, he takes the dog from the girl's hands. The young man hands the completed form to Sunai, who tells him that he must come to the student union tomorrow for a ceremony. They then complete a couple more formal procedures, and she also thanks Ansai for taking care of her younger sister. Ansai then heads to a lecture where the teacher proceeds to lecture on the theoretical aspects of the lesson. She mentions that all the students have already passed the entrance and aptitude tests level, and now it's time for them to adjust to the student life. Wei continues by explaining the fundamental duties of any contractor, emphasizing the importance of maintaining contract entities in good condition. Ansai reflects on how he always tries to keep the dog in good shape while listening to convinces him to lend them some students. The professor explains to all the students that the four standing before them are the captains in charge of the lecture. Wei explains that they have prepared numerous tasks for each group and that the beginner-level tasks will primarily take place in the Lask city center, which is related to intelligence activities. One student inquires whether they will be dispatched to more hazardous locations afterward, complete all of their assignments, but the other students believe that is improbable. Wei cautions that the center is more perilous than they realize, with contract animal hunters and other criminals operating there. Ansai recalls the day he encountered one of these hunters and reflects that they are not as terrible as they are made out to be. Wei notices that Ansai is listening to her absent-mindedly and throws a piece of chalk at him, telling him that if he doesn't want to die on a mission, everyone must listen to her attentively and not get lost in his thoughts. She mentions that they lost 20 rookies the previous year and emphasizes the importance of taking even the less dangerous tasks. He announces that the students must now divide into teams of 3 and select tasks for themselves. The students begin to crowd around Ansai and invite him to join their groups, but he refuses, saying that he already has a team he's comfortable working with. So smiles and comments that it's better to work with proven and trustworthy fighters. The three of them approach a table covered with task flyers. One task is escorting cargo. The complexity of this task is low. It involves escorting a shipment of high-quality raw materials to the laboratory. Combat brigade members will also be among the convoy. War group stationed at the academy. Captain Sang, Captain Chow, and their two subordinate teams tell them that they are there to select, accompanying this material. 3 teams are required to complete this task. Task 2. Find the product. The difficulty. The task involves a shipment of goods that was stolen from Chow's sales agent, so it must be located and returned to its rightful owner. Task 3. Catch the beast. This is a high-complexity task. According to reports from the surrounding area, one of the contracted beasts has contracted rabies, and as a result, it has begun attacking ordinary citizens. The beast's condition has also been transmitted to its owner. The team is required to capture the beast and, if necessary, neutralize it along with its owner. So asks Ansai which task they will choose, but Ansai replies that all of these tasks are fairly simple, and the reward for completing them is minimal. Therefore, they should choose the task that will give them the most system points. Ansai asks the system if he can obtain points for kill the contracted beast and its owner, a request to which the system responds affirmatively. Ansai then tells the boys that they will be undertaking task number 3. By comments that the Faculty of Logistics are probably the only ones capable of handling that task, but she reminds them that act proportionally to their strength and do not try to stand out unnecessarily. She provides them with additional materials for each task and asks the boys to be careful. After completing the task, their work will be evaluated based on the accuracy of execution and the complexity involved. Those who receive outstanding players for their teams, so they should think carefully and not make any hasty decisions. After obtaining permission, they begin to high grades will have the opportunity to study the fog alongside the student staff. The students comment that it doesn't seem like a reward because it is extremely dangerous in the dark, and they almost died during the entrance exam. However, Bei says they can obtain many points by exploring the fog, and they will understand for themselves how they can spend those points within the academy. Furthermore, they will venture into the fog accompanied by the student union of students, which guarantees a certain level of safety. They will have the opportunity to obtain high-level beast crystals, which are highly valued within the reference city. Moreover, valuable resources that can improve their environment or means of protection can only be found there. Protection. With a skillful approach, they can equip themselves to the same level as students in the combat faculty. Bei concludes his lecture by saying, "No, there will be classes after lunch, and they should rest well to start their assignments the next day." Sui approaches Ansai and says that after lunch, they are going to study the materials for the mission, inviting him to join if he can. Ansai says it's a good idea, but he needs to see Bei because he has pending matters with her. The young man approaches Professor Bei and tells her that he wanted to ask her a couple of questions about combat skills. She says that she will listen, but first he should help her carry a pile of papers to the staff room. Bei says she will change her clothes and wait for him in the training room. Recruit. Captain San calls the blonde girl and asks her to join her second search team. The girl is confused and tries to explain training. Meanwhile, Dao and Ansai are training in the gym, and the system notifies them that the Furious Roar skill has been mastered and that the synchronization with the host has reached 100%. Ansai comments that the synchronization speed is quite slow, but perhaps in an actual fight, it will happen much faster. The professor enters the room and tells Ansai that she brought him combat skills. The boy is delighted and says that she is being too generous and that a couple of techniques would be enough for him. She replies that if that's what he wants, then she will only teach him a couple of techniques. Although she initially wanted to give him a choice between 2 skills, Ansai smiles uncomfortably and tells her to forget what he said, and that 1 skill and a couple of techniques are fine. The professor then says that, to begin, the young man should train with the free bench crash. She asks him to show her everything he's able to do, and she, in turn, will analyze his movements and select the most suitable skills for him. Ansai asks Bei to carefully observe his cast, training carefully. Professor B sits on the couch, folding her hands, hoping that the boy won't disappoint her. Ansai begins to train, and Bei immediately notices his mistakes. His punch is strong but very clumsy, and his attack combinations are completely chaotic. Bei stops Ansai and tells him that his combinations are completely random, like something you'd see from thugs fighting in the portals. so half of his strength is wasted. She tells him, to Captain Chow, that her creature is just a plant, but Chow tells her that she wants her at all costs, and a snake-like tentacle emerges from her, and that she will now show him how things should be done, and stands in front of Ansai. She kicks and punches the air, cutting a target behind him in half, of Ansai, sending her crashing into the wall. The boy rushes over to Bei, begging her to teach him as well. She tells him that he's still a long way from possessing that speed and precision in his strikes like she does, but on the other hand, he will be able to execute coordinated attacks with his beast, much like she does with most of the contractors. They instruct their animals in skills, but don't master those skills themselves. Most of the time, they simply direct the beast while they observe from the sidelines, and those who manage to work in tandem with their beast have a significant advantage over them. Ansai believes that, considering the Tao system and its characteristics, he will have an advantage even against Professor Bei herself. The woman then imparts a new combat skill called mimicry and selects animal techniques, taking its characteristics into account. The boy clicks on the master button that appeared in the window. Bale says that the system at least teaches his beast stability. After a while, she begins to discover techniques within herself that she couldn't before master. The system notifies him that the combat skill mimicry has been mastered, and, taking into account the skill's specifications, the contracted beast has also mastered the Boca-del technique. Professor Bei says that while Ansai is at the most basic level, it is unlikely that he will notice. Attacks the girl, but the plant slices at her like a blade. Everyone was shocked to see this, especially Chow, who was any change, as it will take some time. Bei doesn't have time to finish her sentence, because Ansai uses the ability and attacks the target just as well as she does. Likewise, the boy smiles, saying he seems to have done well. Bei looks at him in disbelief, thinking this guy is a monster. She says that the ability is only mastered by the contractor after practicing joint attacks with him. He sits slumped in a chair and, sadly, says that it took her a little over a month to learn it. He says he was going to spend a couple of weeks slowly teaching Ansai new combat skills, but apparently, it's not necessary. But apparently it is not necessary. She gives all her combat skills to Ansai. The young man says he is very grateful to Professor Bei, and she leaves the room shocked and disheartened, telling him that he should study and that he should go home because he doesn't need her there. Ansai asks the woman, since she came all this way, if she could train with him a little. He sighs, thinking that he hasn't even shown her the basic evasion techniques yet. Even so, and although it would be better to beat him down so he doesn't get proud too early, the curator says that, since he's asking so much, she will stay to practice with him. The beast of Professor Vala is a semicircular Capricorn, a huge animal similar to a goat but much more massive, which stands on 2 legs. She asks Ansai if he's ready, and he gets into position. His training begins the next day. The young man heads to the square where his comrades are, really excited, and begs the girl to join her sister's team, no matter what. The girl is unsure what to say, but then she thinks about Ansai, and waiting for him. He apologizes for the delay, explaining that he was a little exhausted from training yesterday, which is why he overslept. Today, So comments that, it seems Ansai is obsessed with training. Even before finishing a task, he never misses the gym. Sui says, it's time for them to move. But Professor B still isn't there. She was supposed to give them one last instruction before the trip. Ansai doesn't recognize Sui and jumps forward to introduce himself, but the girl is confused and asks if he's okay because he startled her. Ansai apologizes to Sui, saying he simply didn't wake up and isn't feeling well, so there's no need to wait for her, and they should head out immediately. Sui tells Ansai that yesterday afternoon they studied the mission materials carefully, hoping he would join them, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. She asks why Ansai bailed on them. Planted there since yesterday, Ansai scratches his head and says he just wanted to train a little before going to bed so he'd be at least somewhat prepared, but in the end, he just got too excited. Sui smiles and says she knew he had gone off to train, so they'll catch him up at the cafe. Sitting in a cafe, the trio examines the mission materials, which include many photos of victims of animal attacks and contractors. Sui comments that the small animal they contracted appears in some photos, so that's probably their target. So is amazed at how a girl can drink coffee while looking at photos of the dead and injured. Ansai asks for some time to consider the offer. Chow agrees, and says that she will go to her dorm to talk with her that night. Then the girl leaves, and the other, that the animal looks like a rat. Meanwhile, a young man lies in the sewers, shaking in a terrible fit, only to calm down a second later. The rat approaches him and curls up next to him. The boy apologizes to the animal, asking for forgiveness for scaring it again. The intervals between his attacks are becoming increasingly shorter. In this state, the young man is gathering all the ingredients, making an antidote an urgent necessity. The boy stands up, picks up the animal and a sack of ingredients he managed to collect, and heads toward the door located deep within the sewers. The person at the door, which leads to the laboratory, asks the boy why he has returned so quickly and whether he actually found everything he needed. The young man answers, hysterically, that he brought almost everything they asked for, but his attacks are happening too frequently, and he can't continue like this any longer. The hooded man says, enraged that the young man is so pathetic and actually believes he would recommend a scumbag like this poor wretch to be accepted into his gang. The young man starts to beg for help, only to be rudely interrupted and told to find the remaining ingredients and not bother him by being in the laboratory. They hand him an amulet and tell him to get lost. Disappointed, the young man takes the amulet and says he will now go and fulfill a commission. Meanwhile, Ansai and his comrades are still sitting in the cafe, reviewing the materials. At the same location, a girl is invited. Her contracted animal is a grass deer. People were curious to know what caught Chow's attention. The professor wondered how that plant could be so strong. It could be some kind of... She raises her hand to greet the boy, but abruptly changes her mind, thinking he is occupied and not wanting to distract him. Sao. He asks how much longer they'll be sitting at the cafe, and Sui replies that she didn't hear what Professor Bay said. The mission could be very dangerous. So, if there's a serious threat, she won't save him. The boy retorts that he doesn't need her help because he has his brother, Ansai, and he can defeat anyone. Sui says that he'll probably hide behind Ansai his whole life, and doesn't plan on growing as a person. Ansai, who has been studying the materials the entire time, says that it looks like a pattern is forming. First, 2 people were killed by a beast that was already susceptible to rabies, and, on the bodies of the deceased, there are claw marks from small animals. Secondly, the photos show that the victims' houses were burglarized, taking everything indiscriminately. Since this happened on the outskirts, it's impossible to determine if it was a murder committed during a robbery, or if the thieves broke in after the murder occurred. Ansei's initial suggestion is to personally inspect the victims' homes. Sui questions whether this is a good idea, considering those tasks seem more appropriate for the combat brigade. Sui points out that they are already short-handed, and the ranks of the combat brigades are thinning out with each mission. They barely have enough personnel to maintain the defense as it is, and if they had the time there was no one between them. The guy possessed a gigantic red dragon. Then, the little puppy that Ansai had begins to transform into something more. Mutated plant that has not yet been discovered. Or perhaps Ansai's vision was actually caused by the monstrous plant, but was delayed because of this task. They wouldn't have assigned it to the students. Ansai smiles and replies that they will become a mini combat brigade themselves. Then, he suggests, they divide the responsibilities among themselves to make things easier. Sui says she will handle the logistics, since she can manage it better than anyone after leveling up her fan. Ansai will be the main force, and So will do the investigative work, which So isn't too happy about, expressing his indignation. But Ansai tells him not to despair because his role is important. As Ansai leaves the cafe, he runs into Wan Kai, who tells him that the glorious Trinity from the Faculty of Logistics, a dog, a duck, and a goose, crossed his path on the road. Ansai is Kai's friend, and the young man pushes him aside and asks him not to block the way, which angers Wan Kai because his joke was ignored by his friends. Wan Kai thinks that if it weren't for Ansai's little friend, I could have taken down Kai by now. Zo tells Wanai that the beast is only in the intermediate stage of savagery and is no match for Ansai, so he doesn't understand the situation. Why are they so presumptuous? A friend of Wanai suggests teaching them a lesson before they even complete the task, wondering what gives them the right to act that way. But those words make Brother Wang angry. He grabs his friend and furiously asks what he plans to do, because Ansai's puppy is only in the initial stage, initial skill development. Another friend tries to calm the situation, saying that a direct confrontation isn't necessary. They can provoke something while they are doing the fewness. For some unknown reason, I wasn't sure why. Meanwhile, Wan Kai stops Ansai and tells him to wait after the admissions, but Ansai is focused on task. Wan Kai says that it's a good idea because they study together and need to help each other. Suddenly, Saon appears behind Kalal and his friends. Saying he overheard their conversation, he warns them not to mess with Ansai and his team. Wan Kai questions why he's defending Ansai, considering he studies at Martial College. Wan Kai's friend mentions they were discussing helping Ansai, urging him to calm down and sit. Sion resorts to force, fueled by anger, but before leaving, she says it would be better for them if they actually helped. After Sion leaves, Kai's friends say she's very angry and turn to face her. Wan Kai, who looks gloomier than a cloud, is asked what's wrong, but he coldly replies that Ansai is a corpse and his days are numbered. Entering the inner circle. Later that day, Ansai opens his rookie package in his dorm room, only to find dog food and a dog breeding manual. Now he has no other choice but to review what is written in the book. While reading the book and feeding Dao, the latter bites his hand. Ansai realizes that he must train him properly. First, the dog food is increasing Dao's experience level, and Dao still wants to eat more, but before that happens, Ansai takes him to the training ground to teach him some basic moves. An old man was observing them, and he finds it interesting since he was there for basic training alone. Unlike the others, Ansai teaches Dao how to, even before school starts, swimming, running on the treadmill, lifting weights, and other basic exercises. Afterwards, they both take a shower. Ansai checks his own stats to see how strong he is now, and he's surprised by the results. He discovers that, with Dao's improvement, his stats are also increasing at an incredible rate. He is very happy about this. Dao is eating so much that he finishes 93 bags of food in just 3 days. Ansai is on a tight budget and is thinking about buying some. The guy's lion attacks him, but Ansai takes it down with a kick. The lion's body ended up beneath his feet, and the little cub was now a big, ferocious dog. Food as a backup and contacting his family. There are telephone booths available, and communication is only possible through them due to the fog surrounding the area. Half the world was about to pick up the phone when he overheard 3 people talking about him. Their pockets were stuffed with money, and they were searching for him. Ansai approaches them and asks why they are looking for him. They explain that it's because of his sister, who was worried because she hadn't heard from him in a day and had snuck away to wait for him in the back alley. After telling him this, they leave. Ansai hesitates, as she is too young to come there alone. He wonders if it's Juan trying to get revenge, but since he is very strong now, he isn't afraid. Therefore, he enters the alley. As soon as he enters, the enormous bat tries to attack him, but he dodges it. But behind him is that big, bad guy. He wonders why his creature is The dirty little dog orders his bat to kill Ansai, but leave Dao alone. The bat releases sonic sound waves. Ansai covers his ears and can't move. The man is happy because, after catching the dog, the man in black will recruit him, but suddenly, a red aura bursts out of Dao and takes the shape of a large hunting dog. On the other hand, Ansai grabs the bat and smashes it against the wall. The man starts bleeding as well. Ansai calls it a weak flame. The man is really angry and lunges towards him. He asks the bat to give him maximum power to destroy the internal organs of. Behind him, Ansai calls the cub Dao and asks him not to use foul language. Now, let's see who Ansai really is. Somehow, he was transferred to this world. Ansai. Ansai releases the bat and, before the man could hit him, delivers a blow to his chest, breaking his ribcage and damaging his internal organs. Then Ansai also grabs the bat and tears off one of its wings. The man, now downtrodden, is absolutely shocked to see such a strong new kid. Crawling like a rat, he tries to escape, but Ansai blocks him. Then, Ansai begins to blackmail him, saying that he knows everything about his family and their address, and about his sister. Ansai tells him that none of that matters, because now his life is in his hands. Ansai breaks one of his legs and starts dragging him even further, deep into the alley. The roles are now reversed. Suddenly, a girl yells at him to stop. It was Chow. Her red snake was hissing on her shoulder. Ansai tries to explain that the man brought him there, but the man begs Chow for help. Chow begins to interrogate him, asking why he brought a student lured him to an alley, under the pretense of snatching his contracted creature. The moment the man touches Chow's leg, his body begins to petrify. Chow tells him that they have no place for garbage like him, and kicks his head in. Chow tells Ansai that since it wasn't his fault, the matter will end here and now. Ansai wonders if she is a friend or a beast because of her strange attitude. Before leaving, Chow tells him that the bat's body is worth tens of thousands of dollars, so he should find a way to deal with it. Ansai was stunned after hearing this. Even if his parents worked hard for